Stan Gibilisco here, proprietor and operator of amateur radio station W1GV. Whiskey 1 Good Vibrations. I've been talking about electrical versus acoustical signals under the surface of a planet without an ionosphere. For example, the Moon or Mars. I don't think that has much of an ionosphere, if any. Or asteroids, which definitely don't have any atmosphere or ionosphere. How would radio hams communicate over the horizon on such objects? Well, one way, of course, is to deploy artificial satellites, but these are human-made objects, and I'm talking about a purely natural form of communication. That is to say, not requiring any human infrastructure at all. No human-made infrastructure. For two ham radio stations who can't see each other visibly or are not on a line of sight, on a planet with no atmosphere and no ionosphere, such as the Moon or an asteroid, there are two modes of signal transmission through the object itself. One is an electrical signal, and the other is an acoustical signal. Now, someone mentioned in the other video about subsurface communications, the system that was deployed in the United States for quite some time for communication with submarines from a location, I believe it was somewhere in Wisconsin. And this was by transmitting electrical signals through the earth at a very low, extremely low frequency. These signals traveled at just about the same speed as electrical currents would in a wire, that is, almost instantaneously. It would only take a fraction of a second for the signal to get from the ground-based station to the submarine or vice versa. Electrical signals travel quite fast beneath the surface, provided that the surface is a good conductor, or that the object itself, the Earth, the Moon, the planet, the asteroid, is itself a decent conductor of electrical signals. But suppose it isn't. Suppose it's just a rock, like limestone or something that doesn't conduct electrical current very well at all, or electromagnetic current very well. You'd have to resort to acoustical disturbances in order to communicate. And these signals travel much more slowly than electrical signals, regardless of the type of medium, whether it be a conductive, electrically conductive wire, the air, water, limestone, granite, even a stone that conducts well for electricity. When it conducts an acoustical wave, the wave is going to travel much more slowly. Maybe 1,000 miles an hour, 2,000, 3,000 miles an hour, instead of hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of miles per second. So to communicate from one side of the Moon to the other by means of acoustical disturbances beneath the surface, the signal would require hours, or at least a good fraction of an hour, if not several hours, to get from one end of the communications circuit to the other. If it's an acoustical wave, it's a much different type of disturbance, and it travels at a much slower speed. Now, that will have a dramatic effect on communication on large objects such as the Moon or Mars or Pluto, but a much smaller effect on small celestial objects such as asteroids, which may only be a few thousand meters in diameter. There may only be a matter of minutes or hours, probably just minutes. But it won't be something where you can just have a conversation with the other station. you're going to have to get used to the idea of sending a signal in one direction, sort of like an email, and then waiting for the response, but waiting a long time. Like you might wait until afternoon to open an email that somebody sent you this morning. It would be vastly different. You'd have to get used to a vastly different mode of communication. Full duplex, out of the question with acoustical communication. So no one pointed that out. I was rather surprised until I realized that I hadn't even thought about it myself until just a little while ago, as I was laying in my bed again, daydreaming again. I've been quite sick of late, and it's been hard for me to leave the house. I've been put on new medication for blood pressure, and it makes a pretty good zombie out of me, can you tell? And it also causes me to think of weird stuff like sending acoustical waves through asteroids to communicate. Those aren't things that radio hams normally think about doing. I normally don't think about setting up a station on an asteroid and another station on a different part of the asteroid, but the future may hold such things. And we need to think about how we, radio hams, need to think about how we're going to deal with it. Besides getting zoned out on blood pressure medication, the stress of such a journey is debatable. We'll find out, though, someday, just as I found out, just by laying in my bed and daydreaming about weird stuff. I guess that's my occupation. Professional dreamer. How much it pays? Open to question. Depends on how many of my Amazon books you decide to buy as a result of watching my weirdness on YouTube. I've done some books that have gotten some pretty good reviews, most notably at this time, Beginner's Guide to Reading Schematics, 4th edition. You might want to check that out. It has to do with electrical signals. So far. Stan Gibilisco, W1GV, saying 73, inviting you to think along, so long, which translates regardless of the mode of communication, regardless of the speed of propagation, into the CW language, da-da-da-da-da-da.